Hi everybody, hope you're having a lovely Easter Monday. It is a really beautiful autumn day outside, isn't it? I've just been for a big walk and now I'm going to read you this book called The True Story of Mary Who Wanted to Stand on Her Head. And as I said yesterday, it is quite a strange book. So off we go. It's quite a little book too, so I'll have to hold it up like this. The True Story of Mary Who Wanted to Stand on Her Head by Jane Godwin, that's me, and Drahos Zak, who was the illustrator of this book. Off we go. There she is, upside down. Oh, there's a lot of pages before it gets started, aren't there? When Mary was merely a very small girl, unable to read or to write, she engaged in an act of incongruousness, quite startling and most impolite. When her parents, of which there were no more than two, were stating she's very well bred, without prior warning, she turned upside down and proceeded to stand on her head. They studied a medical book on the shelf while pouring large glasses of sherry. Could our child have a case of the festering worm, rodent ulcer, sheep rot, beriberi? An appointment was made with a doctor, the best in the care of small children to date. He examined poor Mary from head to both feet, taking note of each item she ate. Look at that, did an x-ray of her. He frowned and he coughed and consulted x-rays. It's not right at all, he concluded. Are there any unusual genes in the line? They wondered to what he alluded. Could he know about Mary's great aunt who ran off to fly a trapeze in the States? Don't mention my brother, hushed Mary's mother. He lifted incredible weights. It can run in families, you see, said the doc. He put on his glasses and mumbled. The problem with standing on top of one's head, it results in the brain being jumbled. In one still so young, it's remarkably odd to develop in practical ways of perceiving the world with one's upside turned down. You're in for some difficult days. The doctor prescribed his own tonic and then he prescribed an indefinite stay at the Heaven-Sent Hospital, Children's Ward C, where parents are best kept at bay. He later announced that he'd cured her for good, and he showed the fine folk to the door. But almost as soon as his bill had been paid, Mary's feet lifted clean off the floor. A behavioural problem, the specialist cried as his fingers were writhing with glee. I'm afraid drastic measures will have to be called. It's a syndrome, and I hold the key. Unusually rare is this spectrum disorder. Please understand, little is known. Now take her away to the desert at once and leave her there alone. Leave Mary alone, her poor parents proclaimed. In the desert, we're most alarmed. People do it quite often nowadays, he replied. She won't be unduly harmed. Just the place for a child, the specialist chortled, and only for 2 or 3 days. One has time to reflect in the desert, he added, time to mend one's ways. A physician revered in the field he was, and keen on behavioural disorder. Those unfortunate parents thus took his advice and deserted their dear little daughter. Night 1 in the desert was cold and unpleasant. Night 2 was respectively better. Mary found she could amble wherever she liked. There was nobody there not to let her. She stood on her hand and she walked on her hands. It was really remarkable fun. She rode in the dip of a camel's round back as they flew by an upside-down sun. There she is riding on a camel. Oh no, they located her later and brought her back home. She'd appeared to survive rather well. Now that must have cured her, they said in hushed tones. But Mary seemed sad for a spell. School, education is what the child needs to eliminate fanciful ways, and so a solution was had by them all. School for the rest of her days. Look at Mary's school, it looks quite spooky and scary, doesn't it? At Mary's fine school there was only one rule, do everything everyone said. And rule number 2, introduced by Miss Poole, was never to stand on your head. Miss Poole called her rude, said how impudent, and expelled Mary right on the spot. Fortune had it the camel was waiting outside. They made off at quite a fast trot. He carried her back to his place in the dunes, conducted a tour of his house. She met a large lizard who lay in the sun, and a charming marsupial mouse. Mary quickly made friends with the reptile and mouse, sharing honey, warm berries and bread. They possessed some fine qualities, one of them being not to mind if one stood on one's head. In fact, they were curious, keen to chat more. I like to run backwards sometimes, the camel confided to Mary, and then the lizard, now watch how he climbs. The name of the mouse was Edwina Marie. The camel had been christened Hugh. The lizard could not quite remember his title, so Mary thought Mister would do. They drank from a well that the camel had found. 'Twas deep underground in the cool. Watched the moon rise in the brightest of skies. Slept under the stars as a rule. Galumping through sand dunes that melted away at the edge of the Spearmint Sea. Mary's life felt complete. The air tasted sweet with her soulmates, of which there were 3. They met other people, some quaint little folk, who travelled the sea in a sieve. They turned round and round, yet were never once drowned, and discovered their own way to live. She forgot all about her lost parents, which seems unfortunate in the extreme. Did they call out the name of their sweet only child? Were they waiting for her to redeem? They never once saw their young daughter again, though they searched half the desert, I'm told. But in their own dreaming their child would return, a fabulous sight to behold. One must remain silent, one's eyes search the shadows of darkest, most infinite blue. Imagine her smile, watch her dance through the night. You'll see Mary, or sense her, it's true. You'll see Mary, or sense her, it's true. And that's the end of the true story of Mary who wanted to stand on her head. Now tomorrow I am going to be reading you a book called Dreaming of Antarctica, which is the first book that I ever wrote. We've come to almost the end of all the books that I've written, that I've been reading to you for the last couple of weeks. So I hope you enjoyed the true story of Mary who wanted to stand on her head. It is probably my most unusual book that I've ever written, and tomorrow I will be sharing with you Dreaming of Antarctica. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your Easter break, and school starts tomorrow for people in Victoria, doesn't it? So I hope that you have a good start to school, whether you're going to school or whether you're going to do school from home, and I'll be back tomorrow to read you one last story. Okay everybody, bye for now.